California Highway Patrol officers issued nearly 20,000 tickets to drivers who violated the state's hands-free cell phone law last month alone. That's a 3.6% increase compared to the same time last year. And it happened during CHP's Distracted Driving Awareness Month. Dave Alpert, Los Angeles.
More than 50 million people are under the threat of heavy rain, strong winds, hail, and isolated tornadoes. The storms stretch from Texas to Minnesota and are moving east as the Mississippi River remains above flood stage. I'm Ann Cates.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Your home is important. That's why Geico helps make it easy to save on homeowners insurance. Because home is more than just a place. Home is where you have a cute little reading nook for those rainy days when you want to curl up with a good book, but you don't even read, so you just sit in there during thunderstorms and scroll through memes on your phone and laugh in the darkness. The Geico Insurance Agency could help protect the dark, meme-filled corner you call home. Call Geico and see how easy it is to switch and save on homeowners insurance.
The following program, To the Left, is sponsored by To the Left Media, LLC, and to the extent applicable, their guests. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of NewsWeb Radio Company or its management.
You're listening to WCPT's To the Left with Samina and Shauna. Here are our hosts, Samina Mustafa and Shauna East.
And thank you, Lady B, our fearless producer, for the last time.
Holler. Hi, Lady B.
Hi.
Thank you so much. You're the best.
Thank you.
So we're listening to the Left. We are doing our last show here at WCPT. I'm Samina Mustafa.
And I'm Shauna East.
And we'll do a little, kind of thank yous at the end, but what a week. Wow.
Real snooze fest.
Yeah. And we're going to have some awesome guests on. We're going to be talking about Lift the Ban, the ban on rent control, with some organizers. And then we're going to have Keena Collins, who's running for Congress in the 7th Congressional District, a little later. So we've got a very packed show, but we're going to talk about the stuff that's been going on this week. So let's start with the abortion bans that happened. It just... yeah.
Keep on coming.
Staggering. So I think one of the biggest sort of important things to remember is that, one, everyone is sort of saying that you should boycott Georgia or all this stuff. Alyssa Milano especially was kind of pushing that, which is really not understanding that that's going to hurt working people and people of color more, who are already the ones who are going to be inordinately hurt by these bans. And so it's completely tone deaf and not talking or listening to the folks on the ground who are saying, do not do this. Help us. Give us resources. Help us fight this with, the money and boots on the ground. And don't turn away. This is the wrong time to turn away.
Yeah, I contacted Anoa Changa, who's been a guest on our show, an activist and organizer in Georgia, and she gave me a list of organizations and abortion funds to, get the word out about so people can donate and support. And she said that's where the greatest need is right now. So I trust people on the ground and, do what they want. So,
and there's a couple of really cool organizing entities like Sister Song, which is a women of color reproductive justice collective. You've got the National Network of Abortion Funds, which is obviously a national organization led by a black woman who's actually based here in Chicago. And then you've got Chicago Abortion Fund. So there's a lot of organizations to support. Some folks may not know this, is that Planned Parenthood, for example, doesn't have a presence in Georgia and Alabama. So if you want to support clinics that are providing abortion services, they're all independent. So like one of them, I think is
Southeast. There was one that she gave me that was Planned Parenthood Southeast or something.
But they don't have any clinics in those states. So that's what I'm saying. Like they might have an affiliate that does actions, but they don't actually have clinics. So there's I think the Feminist Women's Health Center, which is in Atlanta, and we'll share some links. But there's the actual providers, the folks that are dealing with the protesters and have to deal with security, in addition to providing abortion care, are all independent.
So my thing I want to say is that, I don't want people to be confused that this is anything about religion or values or actually valuing life, human life. We know that these folks do not value human life from the time that you are born till you die.
Yeah.
So it's oppressive measures. I think it's about white supremacy. It's about misogyny. It's about, folks losing their status in society, perceived that women are becoming more empowered, people of color are becoming more empowered, and these are oppressive measures to reverse that.
Yeah, there's an article that was written a couple of years ago, and there's some things that have been written more recently, that the whole concept of, sort of the resistance of the evangelical and the sort of religious right, so-called religious right against abortion, was actually as a response to the segregation academies that were sort of under threat. And that happened several years after Roe v. Wade. So this is essentially a way to sort of pull sort of more conservative Catholics, which hurts really Democrats, than that they really had that base before this. And so it's been used as an electoral play, and it's working in some cases. But if you look even just at those states that we're talking about, the other piece of it is in the voter suppression. So it's like, specifically in the case of Georgia, Brian Kemp stole that election. And so for him to sign that bill, it's like, oh, this would not have happened with Stacey Abrams as governor. This is a direct. So, that's actually the other organization that I've been encouraging folks to support is Stacey Abrams' organization, which is Fair Fight Action, which is working on free and fair elections. So that's really sort of critical to this conversation. This is an overarching plan to marginalize and criminalize activities or actions by people of color, so they don't have a right to vote. Because if you're a felon, you can't vote in most of these states, and so that's disenfranchising those folks, and then it's also taking away their right to choose and bodily autonomy. So.
And I think we were going to talk about a couple things coming up in Chicago.
Yeah.
So I saw Tara Stamps, also another past guest of ours who ran for alderwoman in the 37th Ward and unfortunately did not win. But she let me know that CTU, she's actually leading a rally downtown Chicago at the Thompson Center. It's going to be at 4:30 p.m. on Wednesday, the 22nd. So I'll be down there. And
okay. And then there's also a rally being organized by Kelly Hayes, well-respected Indigenous activist and writer, who is organizing with Chicago Abortion Fund and a couple other folks for an event on the 23rd. And that, I believe, is happening at 5 o'clock at Federal Plaza. But we can link to those as well. And that's going to be a big action, specifically responding to the abortion ban and pulling together the predominantly women of color organizers here locally who work on this every single day. I know there's folks who do clinic escorts. I mean, people don't think about that, but that happens here too. I know, one of our friends, Jill Manrique, does clinic escort work, and those folks are they're protesting at clinics here in Chicago. So this is not a Southern only issue.
Yep, it's true. Yeah, I actually had an abortion in 2002 at Planned Parenthood on Division, and there were protesters there, and, it's it's hard enough of a decision when you have to make that decision, and especially when the, person who impregnated you isn't involved, and you have to come up with the money, and you have to deal with all this other stuff. This was before the internet. I didn't know how to look up where to go. The first place I ended up going was actually like a Christian place that persuades you out of having an abortion. So there was like, that was kind of a mind F.
Yeah.
So they basically told me I was a killer and I needed to bring the baby to term and then give it up for adoption. And when I left, and I knew that wasn't an option for me, and I was 22 years old and like working, and I'm just going to be pregnant at work, and then all of a sudden I won't be pregnant and I won't have a kid. Like, what? I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. So yeah, it's really traumatic to have to make this decision in the first place, and then deal with the folks who are throwing stuff at you, screaming at you, telling you you're a killer, holding up disturbing pictures as you're walking in.
Yeah, and even the staff that have to go there every single day. I remember observing at that same clinic when I was on staff, and you walk in, there's bulletproof glass. I mean, people are risking their lives to work there. So it's a really, it's something, again, that folks are sort of removed from. And the clinic I worked at didn't actually provide abortion services, and it it really just provided like birth control and other family planning. And the protesters know that. They know exactly where to go. They have, maps showing where, and they have lists of physicians who do this. So the physicians who are doing this work, the providers are under attack, and they literally have a target on their backs. So it's really all of the organizations. One in particular that I think is really, in addition to Chicago Abortion Fund, is Midwest Access Coalition, that helps women come to Chicago to get abortion services. It provides like a place to stay and coordinates that. And they've actually been really concerned because all these people are like, oh, we want to start this, they've been using really just like appropriating language to say like, oh, you can stay with me and I'll help you get, to a clinic. But it's like, no, we do this. Support us doing this work. We know exactly how to do this. We know how to get you there safely. We know which providers are like not what you would describe, which is a crisis pregnancy center, which is like a fake. These are actually, there's a proliferation of them that basically or say, are you pregnant? We can help you. And it's essentially you go in and they show you, pictures of fetuses, and they're trying to keep you from getting care. So groups like Midwest Access Coalition, another one that I have been a supporter of for a couple of years is Midwest Access Project. Similar name, very different. They actually train folks, providers, to give services, because that's the other piece of this whole thing is that, if you go to a Catholic hospital or if you go to another religious hospital that doesn't agree with abortion services, you won't be able to, like, say, do a residency there and learn that. Or go to a medical school that has a religious focus that does not agree with abortion. You won't be learning any of these things. So that what the other way they're doing is shrinking the number of folks who are trained and have experience doing this. And so Midwest Access Project does that work too, and there's other folks like that, but they have been doing that for decades. And so, like, that's the other piece of it is, like, remembering, like, hey, there's this whole pipeline of folks who've been doing this. They know how to do it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And frankly, these are usually started by, either low-income women or women of color who had to fill in the gap for themselves because they couldn't. As one woman said to me, who runs a PAC, actually, that helps pro-choice candidates, said, oh, before Roe, we just flew to Mexico. Nothing about women dying, nothing about...
How do you fly to Mexico? That means you have to have some means to...
Exactly. So tone deaf. And I'm like, no, I think there were actually a lot of women who did not. And there was a woman who is a physician, shared something from a physician who had worked pre-Roe and said, we had a whole ward for women who had, had basically botched abortions. And so they were being given antibiotics. In some cases, they died because of these. I mean, this is going to kill folks. And that's what I think people need to remember. So, yeah. But, and like, this is just one of the things that's happened this week. It's like, it's
I've just been I've been totally triggered by the whole thing, so I haven't really noticed what else is happening, to be quite frank.
Well, the other thing that happened is the federal government just disclosed that they have 1,700, I guess, children that they just discovered. Mm-hmm. So it's 4,700 that we think. We don't really know the number, so that just came out, I think, in the last 24 hours.
The ones they separated that they don't know who the parents are, and...
Yeah. I mean, that's like, and then I think Customs and Border Patrol actually tweeted a picture of them showing staff taking care of detained children. Like, oh, these guys are such good people. No, you imprisoned children. That's why you have to feed them and take care of them, because they are children. They're infants. They're toddlers. It is just staggering. And then we just have a minute left. But the last thing that came up in the last, 24 hours is a Republican came out, Justin, I want to say I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. It's Amash. He's a rep from Michigan, who came out and said Trump committed impeachable offenses. Mm-hmm. And everyone's like, oh my God, finally a Republican with sense. But he's literally somebody who votes against the Freedom Caucus all the time, because he doesn't vote for big military budgets and sort of government overreach. So it's like he's not exactly an ally, but he is known for an independent streak. But so it's like people are thinking like, oh, there's just going to be this flood of Republicans coming out and saying it's time for impeachment. I wouldn't hold your breath. If there's one or two more, that would be great. But I'm not, like the Jim Jordans and the Mark Meadows, who are, sort of Trump, defenders, are not going to do it. So, but that brings us to our first break. And so we are going to come back and talk about Lift the Ban, the rent control ban.
With Vivian So and Tommy Lewis coming up next after our break.
We'll be right back. And we are back. You are listening to the Left. I am Samina Mustafa.
And I am Shauna East.
And we are talking about something that came up a lot in our municipal elections and the last election. It is the campaign to lift the ban on rent control, and we're excited to invite two organizers who work on this all the time. And so welcome, Vivian and Tommy.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. You got a little applause. Our tiny.
We have a huge audience in the studio today for our last show on CPT.
Yeah. So just if each of you could kind of briefly introduce yourself and how you got involved in this work. Vivian, actually, if you could go first.
Yeah. I'm Vivian Zoe. So I am the lead housing organizer at One Northside. We're a community organization on the northeast side of Chicago, but we are one of the many members of the Lift the Ban Coalition. And so we started getting involved over the past year and a half. Actually, we joined the coalition. A lot of our members that we work with have been feeling extremely rent burdened as gentrification has been moving across the north side, including myself, and saw that this movement around rent control was happening. And I think 5 years ago, a lot of people thought it was a pipe dream to fight for this issue, and then saw that, Governor Pritzker has actually made this a campaign issue. Many people are making it a campaign issue. And so all of that excitement came about. Folks really saw that there's, a lot of traction and a way to fight for this, and we got involved. Yeah.
Great. And Tommy, did you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how you got involved with Lift the Ban?
Of course. My name is Tommy, and I have been a 46th Ward resident for the last 4 years. I came from an area of being homeless. The ban in place has made my housing abilities quite much of a challenge, and that does no justice towards the fact that I have health situations to also deal with. I became aware of One Northside because it was within close commute, and decided they had a lot of things that were a concern to me that I felt my voice could be used for. With the Lift the Ban, that professionally and personally touched me well enough to get involved, because I come from those areas in both aspects. And so our initiative is to get rent control put into place so that people are able to have housing, because that is a lifestyle.
Yeah, no, and it's obviously going to have a huge impact. Cities like New York, which have rent control and had it for decades, like that obviously has a huge impact, but that's still an incredibly expensive city to live in. Talk a little bit more about the sort of the campaigns that have happened really at the ward level, because I know you mentioned the 46th Ward, which is actually an area that's gone through quite a bit of transformation. So can you talk a little bit about the sort of the wins that you've had and sort of like what's next?
Yeah, definitely. So the last year, I know we've been doing a lot of referendums to try to just get the public opinion out there about how much this matters and how much.
And so these are non-binding.
These are non-binding referendums within the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago. And so 46th Ward is where we had a bunch of tenants come together and say, we know this is an important issue and we need to prove that. And so got a question on the ballot along with Northside Action for Justice to ask the people, like, what do you think about rent regulation and bringing it to Illinois? It was a resounding 70% of folks in the 46th Ward think that this is an issue that needs to happen. And in addition to that, not a single precinct voted against it. And so, 46 is only one of many. It was 49th Ward has also voted on this. 35th Ward has also voted on this. Many wards in the south and southwest side have voted on this. And so it's clear the city of Chicago cares about this issue. And that's what we've been seeing.
And on those sort of wins that you've had at the ward level, what is the response of the alderman, or in the case of like a couple of folks, alderman-elect, because we just had elections, seems like forever ago, but it was just 2 months ago.
Yeah, like nonstop elections.
Yeah.
We've had our response from the alderman of our ward, which hasn't necessarily been the greatest. He's felt like gentrification should take place because it wards away the violence of the neighborhood, and he doesn't fully, to my opinion, consider the fact that this gentrification is causing low enrollment rates to the schools of our community. It's causing the smaller based businesses to close their doors. It's even taken away some of the regular stores we would have. And he says he has no jurisdiction to what these private market rate developers are coming into our ward and doing. And that's been his
And
attitude.
Which alderman are we referring to?
His name is Kappelman.
Oh,
it's James Kappelman. And our relationship isn't with him about going back and forth. That's not going to necessarily help our ward. It's about keeping the value that's there, making people continue to feel that their importance, their image, their character, what they put into the ward matters. And with gentrification, it diminishes that. I've met a lot of people who have had to relocate and move away from the ward because they cannot afford the rents. The rents are increasing And a lot of guidelines to single room occupancy is changing, causing displacement as well.
Yeah, and that specific property type, has it been, Kappelman has been working with a developer or a couple of developers to take those essentially out of the housing stock of the ward. Right. So it's displacing a lot of folks. It's been happening for about a decade or so.
Exactly.
And we're going to say something, Vivian?
Yeah, I was just going to say, too, I mean, obviously it became an election issue. We've actually seen Alderman Kappel kind of move on this issue, too, as we started doing the on-the-ground work we've been doing. We saw Alderman Joe Moore, who recently lost the election, also move on this issue, saying that they support lifting the ban on rent control. And so it's been important because these referendums have definitely moved aldermen that we would say are typically pretty pro-developer to, looking into it and supporting this issue. And I think that a lot of our progressive leadership that have just been elected on are looking at this. Unfortunately, because the ban is still in place at the state level, though, all of this is really just support by word of mouth than it is, actually on the ground things that we can implement yet. So that's why we've been super focused.
So you talked a little bit earlier about a campaign promise from Governor Pritzker, and you told us before the show that you occupied his office earlier this week or last week, and did you want to give us an update as to what happened?
Yeah.
When we show up, we can be a little animated, which makes it even more entertaining. It just does, we brought in the sheriff with the 5-day notice on,
Perfect. I love it.
I had no idea. They put that surprise on me. I was like, oh my God, what are the sheriffs doing here? We want to evict the matter. I thought it was for his office that there was a sheriff there. I didn't think it was for us. So they got me good.
Oh, wow. We brought a notice to have to respond.
I saw the photos.
Nice.
Yeah. So it was nice, and to show up and say, hey, when our concerns are under attack, what we will do is stand up and fight back, and we will show up. And because these things are very important, there are people, even while we're speaking right now, who are facing displacements that's causing a lot of unforeseen things to happen. And, thank God I had strength in my own endeavor of such, to get through, because not everyone is fortunate.
Yeah, and you alluded to it a little bit, is sort of the sort of domino effect of the displacement. It's like, okay, you have fewer folks who are maybe going to use the public school. Like the school that's, I think, right on Broadway. I want to say is it Sunnyside and Broadway?
Yep.
Stewart School.
Yep.
Uplift.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, Stewart School. It was closed back in back in 2013 when all the schools were being closed, the 50. And so because of the lack of enrollment, it was one of the schools that was closed on the north side, and now it's been turned into luxury lofts at $3,000 plus a month rents. It's such an insult. It's such an insult, right? This is a public space, a public use of the community that's turned into entirely private profit. And so, these are the unfortunate effects of displacement that we keep seeing.
I saw some photos, and they even kept the chalkboards in some of them.
Yep.
Yeah, they kept
some very disturbing.
Right.
Yeah, it's commodifying the basic public needs of the community, which is really insulting. It's infuriating. It doesn't actually bring anything back to folks who've been living there a really long time. And so that's what we've been seeing.
According to our Alderman Kappelman, he said that that no one from a non-for-profit could step forward to acquire the property. So out of his jurisdiction, a private market rate developer stepped forward, and under the conditions with CPS, that is the reason why the chalkboards were kept and plots were put out in the front of the place, which to me makes it looks like graveyard basis. But
the fact that any, condo buyer or whatever would walk in and be like, this really adds character is so disturbing to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which, I know we talked about this obviously needs to be resolved ultimately at the state level, and you're pushing Governor Pritzker. Mayor Elect Lightfoot has voiced her opposition to this. So, I mean, she could be a powerful advocate to push Pritzker. So, what is the sort of the plan to get her on board?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a city plan that we need to make, and I think it's working with the progressive leadership that is currently on board, and so started circulating a letter to get some aldermanic support around the issue. So that does exist currently, and we've been working on that. But in addition to that, Pritzker has been silent on the issue, and after we had occupied his office, we did actually get a response. We got a meeting with his deputy chief of staff, and right now they're saying that they're willing to work with us. There's no timeline, though. There's no clarity on when, so that's what we're pushing on right now. We're going to have a double movement right now around trying to get the plan for when the ban's going to get lifted while also building some city-level support.
And if folks want to learn more on how to get involved, where would they go?
Definitely. You can find us on Facebook, I think is probably the best way, actually, the Lift the Ban Coalition Facebook page. We'll respond to messages. We can get connected there. And we really need more people to be on the ground supporting.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Vivian and Tommy. We really appreciate you coming in, and we will get folks to come out and support you.
We'll share the link.
Yep.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be back with Kina Collins. We'll be right back. Yep. And we are back. You're listening to the Left on WCPT 820, and you're probably watching us on Facebook Live. We are back in the studio. I'm Samina Mustafa.
I'm Shauna East.
And we are joined in the studio. This is a fast-moving show with Kina Collins, who is running for Congress in the 7th Congressional District. Welcome, Kina.
Hi, Samina.
Hi, Kina.
Thank you for having
me. We didn't get the applause. It's okay. There we go. We got it.
Delayed reaction from our studio audience.
We got it. So you know, Kina, you and I know each other and we've worked, but why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and your sort of background, especially most recently in the municipal elections and the work you've done that to just.
Yeah. So once again, thank you so much for having me on. I'm Kina Collins. I was born and raised in the Austin community on the west side of Chicago, still live in Austin. Third generation Chicagoan. My grandparents moved there in the 1970s, and that second great wave in migration of Black folks coming from the South to the North for better opportunities. And my roots run extremely deep in that district, whether it was organizing in Inglewood or back of the yards, or just the old stomping grounds in Oak Park, River Forest, right? So, yeah, a lot of my work and background and a lot of my organizing experience is in gun violence prevention and criminal justice reform work. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I witnessed a homicide by way of gun violence. And it changed the entire trajectory of my life. So I started in high school as a Chicago public school student, organizing nationally and locally around gun violence because I knew that it was just a symptom to larger problems, right? And you learn that very quickly growing up in Chicago, which is super hyper segregated city, right?
move on, did a lot of civic engagement work, worked in the last municipals heavy.
Yeah.
But I've worked on several campaigns and really had a lot of experience both in electoral work and community organizing.
Yeah, and full disclosure, Kina was on my campaign for Congress as well. Just little disclosure there. Let's talk a little bit about the district itself.
Yeah.
For folks who aren't familiar
I
with the
actually
district.
brought a picture because I was like,
there you go.
my goodness.
Look at the one little street that's hanging on by
Jerry. That is a gerrymandered district.
And it's like
Our
such an
cousin,
extremely, diverse district. And tell us about how you're going to tackle this.
Yeah. Well, no, so let's talk a little bit about, because it is, as Shauna, if you want to put it up to the, to the video. For those of you who don't, Shauna's showing that the district goes essentially from the western suburbs, like Oak Park, River Forest, all the way east. But if you want to talk a little bit about sort of like the character of the district.
Yeah. So our district is extremely diverse, not just racially, but economically. There are several different religious sects in the district. And we represent the wealthiest of the wealthy and some of the poorest of the poor. So we are essentially a microcosm of America. That's what I like to call it, because you could be in one portion of the district and literally have, so for example, live in Austin, like I said, I have 15 years less to live living in Austin than if I drove 10 minutes west to Oak Park and lived in Oak Park. That's how deep the inequity is in the Illinois 7th Congressional District. And I think that if we pulled out a map of the U.S., we could pull up many districts that are very similar to that. So it's a mixture also of homeowners. We have a district that's mostly renters. Over 51% of the individuals, residents in the Illinois 7th are renters. So that offers a different dynamic to sustainability, affordability to live in the 7th Congressional District. And then it has the breadth of diversity as far as ethnically, right? So we have Greektown and Illinois 7th, and we have Chinatown, right? So it's the salad, not the melting pot.
Yeah.
It's a salad.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of the inequity that you talked about in terms of income is primarily for, it's on racial lines, obviously.
Yeah.
And, having worked in the Austin neighborhood, I have seen it. I mean, it's been 20 years since I worked there, but it's like when I do drive through, it's like nothing's changed.
Yeah. Actually, I would say some of the areas have gotten worse. We saw with the huge public school shutdown that happened, 50 schools that got shut down in Chicago. Some of them were in Austin. So now, you don't just have entire neighborhoods of abandoned buildings, you have abandoned schools in our district. And for me, that's just unacceptable on every level, that the youth in our community, or even families in our community, can feel the lack of investment in certain areas over other portions of the district.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the fact that you're running for Congress. So let's talk about who you're challenging an incumbent, Danny Davis. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about him and why it's time for him to it's time for him to be replaced.
Yeah. So, I mean, the congressman has a long, distinguished career. And I don't think that many people could take that away from him. What I think the larger conversation needs to be is around the accountability that we need to have in the Democratic Party of creating a pathway of success to elevating new leaders, right? So we're seeing on all fronts where you have fresh faces and new leadership that are trying to rise up, the DCCC implementing their rule, or...
For those folks who aren't political nerds, that's the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which really does the House campaign management.
Yep. They've implemented a rule. Anybody who helps insurgent candidates or new candidates, we will ban you for life. Right? And it sounds like dun dun dun, like really bad.
So
right?
that could be like helping with fundraising,
commercials.
Right.
I mean, anything, political consulting. I mean, anything. And so I've been lucky and fortunate to bring a team together that's really grassroots, extremely progressive, and they're unafraid of that rule because they believe in democracy, right? And that it should be a core value of everybody. Right. And that includes helping
newer candidates who want to step up in their community and say, this is the way that I choose to civically engage and participate in my community.
Right.
So everyone who's listening, we want you to know we're also on Facebook Live, and you can send your questions or comments for Kina. It's facebook.com/To the Left Radio. So in addition to Danny Davis, you're also running against Anthony Clark, who ran last time. And I was curious as to what sets you apart from Anthony as well.
Well, I think that the way that we've arrived to this place of wanting to, whether it was organizing background, obviously we grew up in different communities. I believe Anthony grew up in Oak Park. I grew up in Austin. So the experiences are extremely different. And then I think intersectionally, we experience the world in a different way, right? We look at the world through a different lens. And so I think that's the biggest difference. How we arrived to this point, our organizing backgrounds, and then I think also just like upbringing, the experiences that we had in our upbringing. So
what do you mean by the intersectionality comment?
So, I think that, being a young woman of color and growing up in America or across the diaspora, right? Like, you experience the world differently. And so for me, I don't believe it is not the impetus for my run, right? I don't believe you should vote for somebody because they're a woman, because they're Black, because they're working class. You should vote for people because they will fight for a livable wage, because they believe healthcare is a fundamental right and things like that. But what I also believe is that representation matters, right? And that it emphasizes and spotlights issues in a different way, in a more holistic way, when you are experiencing that discrimination differently, right? So for me, it's a variety of things, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then if you think about what's happened even recently in this cycle, when you've seen primarily women of color who have won, whether it's challenging an incumbent or running for an open seat, it's those folks. It's the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Rashida Tlaibs, the Ilhan Omars, Ayanna Presleys, who are, because they have this experience, they're like, well, no, we're not going to have the same conversation we've had about this issue, whether it's minimum wage, whether it's about environmental justice, because we've actually experienced it in a different way, and we're bringing that experience to our legislative work.
Absolutely. And I think that it's, once again, that's for the electorate to decide, right? Like, if they think that they want that kind of representation, that's for them to decide. But I want to make it very clear, that's not the impetus for my run. And I've always been one of those active voters that I'm not just going to vote on you because we look alike or because I'm a woman. And, because we've seen characters who have come into the political sphere and been extremely problematic and not have pushed forth the issues in a way that is conducive or creates change, right, or sparks change. But for me, mostly, I think between Anthony and I, I've written policy. I've passed civil rights legislation on the state level in Illinois, House Bill 5544, the Illinois Council on Women and Girls Act. And it wasn't passed under the current political atmosphere where we have a trifecta. It was under a very hostile political atmosphere in Springfield. And Bruce Rauner was the one that I forced to doing that, right? We, and let me say we, because it was a coalition of people, right? This was a bill that, before we knew RHA and all of this was going to be happening with the abortion bans, we required the state to allow us to advocate for reproductive health care and the expansion to reproductive health rights. We required that transgender folks can sit on that council. We required that it be racially proportionate to the state. So for me, there's a steep learning curve for anybody who's trying to go into Congress. But I do believe that I will know how to write bills when I get to Congress. I will know how to work with folks, build coalition, push, and not be relentless in making sure that nobody gets left behind.
Right. And something I want to kind of pivot on that is, in a lot of cases, you have sort of ideas or sort of campaigns that have been started by predominantly young women of color. I mean, if we think about the moment we're in right now, tomorrow is Inauguration Day for Lori Lightfoot. The only reason there is a Lori Lightfoot is because young Black women, primarily women and some non-binary folks, decided, hey, no, we're not going to let you get away with Laquan McDonald. It's time to make a change. And so you're seeing that movement happen here locally and nationally.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
And then you got the sort of the dichotomy, which is the Democratic Party taking black women for granted, taking their votes for granted. So this is, to me, there's a conversation to be had, not necessarily like this is a reason to just vote for me, but it's a conversation to have more globally. It's like, if you want our votes, our leadership is just as valuable.
Yeah, it's just as valuable. And I mean, that's a broader conversation that I think is happening more. And we saw that more in the midterms with Roy Moore and Doug Jones, right? When black women essentially came to Alabama and said, no, we're not having it. They went to the ballot box. And in the Democratic Party, it is we are the strongest and most reliable voting bloc. So that's a conversation to be had, definitely.
Yeah. And I had that conversation with Latasha Brown of Black Voters Matter. She's doing the work literally in Alabama. So that was. But do we have any kind of comments or questions on the live feed?
No
Shauna?
questions or anything, but a lot of people watching and some clapping emoji.
Nice.
So we mentioned the DCCC. Have you experienced any,
oh my gosh,
those?
Thank you for bringing that up. Let's talk about it. Absolutely. I had a media strategy team who had heard about me just through the grapevine, and the buzz before my announcement was, people were chattering, and this media strategy team that's very well known here in Illinois pulled me in, and they spoke to me and they said, you have an extremely powerful story and we can't work with you because the DCCC made us sign this contract, and they pulled the contract out and showed me, what it looked like. And they said, but we wish you the best of luck. And, it was really one of those conversations where it's like, when do we stand up against this kind of stuff, right? Like, this is not just about a seat. This is about equity. It's about inclusion. It's about, saying that the DCCC is essentially trying to control who they believe a leader should look like.
Right.
Because that is going to deter a lot of people from running for these seats because they don't think that they will get the support that they need. But I think that when you run for the community will show up for you, right? And so you just have to keep that kind of mindset.
Yeah.
Are they restricting your access to the voter file?
We haven't gotten that far yet because we're in the early introduction, but that is something that happens.
I'm hearing that other challengers of incumbents they're not being given access to it. So it's against democracy,
Yeah, we had to fight for that. We were fighting Democratic Party of Illinois when I ran, and so that was like a real, we had to go back and forth. We had to and so that, what they have now made an official policy was sort of an unwritten rule, right? So when I ran, when I reached out to folks, they either didn't respond or they had some reason like, oh, I work with this person and this person has a relationship. And so there was always some reason that they couldn't help. But what these folks don't realize is what the message they're sending. Let's just remember, before the midterms, the number of women in Congress was a little under 20%. It was about 19%.
Right.
Now it's about 23, 24%. So it only went up about 4%.
Right.
And everyone's losing their minds. Everyone's losing
Even
their
though
minds.
we're like the supermajority.
Yeah,
right?
I know. We're they're losing their minds for 4%. Just imagine if the DCCC specifically wasn't fighting, women who represent their community, have done the work and want to step up. They're talking out of both sides of their mouths. You can't say we value your votes and what have you. But it looks like we have we got somebody calling in. That's cool. Do we want to
We just have 1 minute.
Okay,
sure.
So let's Mary, you're live.
Hi, I just want to know, I don't know who you are, but all I heard was that you take it on Danny Davis, and good job.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
That I just heard what you said. Him and LaShawn Ford, they got to go. They have this whole father's rights movement, and it is so against victims of domestic violence. I really hope that you take them to task. They put on a front like they're here to protect women, and they're wholly owned by this father's rights group. So take them to task, honey. Take them out.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Kina Collins. Follow me. Follow me on Facebook. Kina Collins, Kina. Follow me on Facebook.
Yeah.
I got you, honey.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Appreciate the call. So, I mean, respond to that, sort of like, in terms of the sort of, again, the current leadership and how they've been able to be inclusive in their policies.
So here's just how I feel about it. The onus, once again, falls back on us as a collective and as a community. I would never tell people how to vote or you should just vote for me for how I look. But what I will say is that these issues are generationally have been around longer than Danny K. Davis, longer than Donald Trump, longer than LaShawn K. Ford, longer than a lot of folks. And at what point do we say we want a difference? And that you know, it's a serious conversation that we need to have in this upcoming election in 2020.
And can you tell folks where to go for more information?
Yes, so you can go to Kina for Congress on Facebook, and that's KINA for Congress, or you could follow me on Twitter and Instagram, which is also Kina, the number 4 Congress, on Instagram and Twitter.
And your website?
And my website is KinaForCongress.com.
There you go. Got it all in. Got it all in. Yeah. So, are any events that you want to talk about that are coming up?
Yeah. So June 1st will be my kind of hard launch party that we're doing. And if you follow me on social media, all that information will be rolling out soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thanks for being here. And I want to just give a little shout out to the T-shirt you're wearing for those who are watching on the Facebook Live. That is actually an invention of our another guest of ours, Arthi Walker-Petakotla, who ran and won in Oak Park for village trustee and came up with this Oak Park River Forest racial equity platform and designed these shirts that were for sale.
And she won.
Yeah, and just so for those of you who are listening and can't see them, they say, elect women of color and watch the world change. Awesome. Awesome design. Really fun. So thank you for representing. A little shout out to Arthi for us. So, and so we are at the end of the show, guys. We just want to wrap up. Shauna, do you have some calls to action or thank yous you want to do?
Sure. I want to plug 2 major events coming up for me. And that is I'm very excited to be headed to D.C. as a delegate for the Poor People's Campaign in their first Moral Action Congress. So it's like a national convention for the Poor People's Campaign. It's June 17th to 19th, and people can, I'll share the link on the live stream, and, it's going to be awesome. A lot of workshops and gatherings and delivering demands to Congress and all sorts of things to bring attention to poverty. And on July 27th will be the Illinois for Bernie statewide People's Convention in Rosemont, and I will also share that. That's a event I'm organizing.
Okay, cool. I want to just remind folks about the rallies that are coming up this week for abortion access, specifically the one on the 23rd, which is organized by Kelly Hayes, and that's being co-sponsored by the Chicago Abortion Fund, National Association for Asian Pacific Women's Forum as well. I'm sorry, I'm probably getting, it's NAPOF is the acronym. Those are a couple of other organizers. I think BLM Chicago might also be on that organizing team. But we obviously want to be focused on that, support Yellow Hammer Fund, the Sister Song, and the National Network of Abortion Funds. And I feel like there's another event, but I'm blanking on it. There are some things that we're going to be working on. Specifically, I'm going to actually work on something with Brent Hovde, who you know, nice. And do race-conscious dialogues. It's probably going to be coming up either in June or July. And I'm also going to be working on an action with Kina on June 8th. More details will be published. But for those of you who don't know, the American Medical Association has their headquarters here. They've been a huge opponent of Medicare for All. For those of you who don't know, they're actually the reason why black physicians couldn't get residencies. Fun fact, fun historical fact.
Shout out to AMSA.
Yeah, so and so we are going to be doing an action with groups actually like One Northside and Jane Addams Senior Caucus, Physicians for a National Health Program, where you're currently on staff, and we're going to be doing a big action to protest their really just refusing to sign off on that. They're part of a coalition called the Partnership for America's Healthcare Future, which sounds good, but it's not. It's just drug companies and insurance companies
that are against Medicare for All.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to fight fight back on that.
Is that the same as the NNU?
Yeah,
one
that's
on the
NNU.
8th? Okay.
Yeah. So National Nurses United is also involved with that. Our friend
SNAP
Sheila.
students, which are all
so.
medical students.
What does SNAP stand for again?
Students for a National Health Program.
Okay, so there are actual medical students who are saying, and there's a little bit of a generational split, right? So we're going to be organizing that. So that's really exciting. That's coming up on June 8th. More information will be shared for folks who want to get involved. And again, this is our last show on WCPT. It's been a great run. We want to thank
Ms. Lady B.
Lady B. You've been a terrific support. I know we don't.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You guys have been a great people. I love working with you guys.
Oh, we're gonna miss you. But we have like a lot of folks to thank. We had, some amazing guests, people like Tanya Watkins, Erica Nanton, who is due to give birth any day now. Maria Haddon,
July 30th.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, that's that. She probably, as soon as the weather gets warm, she'll be like any day now. But we had a bunch of aldermen elect: Andre Vasquez, Maria Haddon, Jeanette Taylor.
So you have us to thank.
Basically.
America.
Yeah. Who else? I feel like we're missing Rosana Rodriguez Sanchez, obviously.
Yep.
And Brian Siccho Lopez. That was really exciting. And any other sort of
I want to thank Jackrabbit, all the folks who have been helping us spread the word on social media. Like a lot of the folks we had on would never have gotten any media attention. And if it wasn't for the folks at home, spreading the word, then we never would have gotten the word out. So thank you to all the people who have supported us. Thanks to all of our Patreons who helped us pay for our monthly rent here at WCPT, which ain't cheap.
Yeah.
And, thanks to Vivian for being here earlier, Tommy, Lift the Band Coalition. Thanks to Kina for coming and being on our last show on WCPT.
Yeah. And so it's been a great run. We're going to miss you, Lady B. I know. Look at that.
This is our 30th episode, by the way.
There you go.
No easy feat.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of work to produce an independent show. So with that, I want to say thank you, everybody. This has been To the Left. My name is Samina Mustafa.
And I'm Shauna East.
And thanks for listening.
Thank you.